All right, the final section of Chapter 5, The Road to Revolution. This is where our war begins. So even after, there are these fights at Lexington and Concord, most of our colonists are not wanting quote unquote independence. Like they're like, this is terrible, but we benefit more from being British subjects than we would benefit by becoming independent. So we want to stay part of England. And most of the people that we think of as our founding fathers kind of felt the same way. They wanted to assert their rights as people, but they also were still willing to make up with Britain. Like they were like, look, we don't necessarily have to leave. Let's see if we can work this thing out. The Second Continental Congress is called in Philadelphia in May 1775. So remember, they had already they planned this. They said, okay, if they don't meet our demands, let's meet again and figure out what to do. So here we are. Some of our delegates are Thomas Jefferson. He's a little famous to us. I mean, he might be a little obscure, but we know who he is. A Boston merchant named John Hancock, and Benjamin Franklin, who lives in Philadelphia. This Congress, at first, they don't really know what they're going to do. Some from New England, mostly, these Adamses, they say independence all the way, let's do it 100%. Our middle colonies, who have a little bit stronger of ties economically with Britain, they're like, let's wait. Let's see how this goes. We don't want to be rash here. So they're hoping to maintain the connection, but just about every delegate that was there agreed we need to prepare as if we're going to fight an all-out war, because if we end up having to do that, we want to be ready. The first step to be able to fight a war is to have an army. So that's pretty important. The Second Continental Congress names George Washington commander of this Continental Army. As we saw in some of the previous sections, George was 21 in 53. So now he is in his, we'll say, early 40s, a little bit more experienced. He saw some pretty bad fighting in the French and Indian War, but everyone agrees this man is capable and he's an honorable person. They really wanted someone who represented the best that the colonies had to offer. And so by naming Washington as, leader of this army, not only is he not a bad general, he's pretty good. He's definitely not the best, but he's okay. He's an honorable man, and people want to follow him. This Continental Congress then says, okay, if we have an army, we got to pay them. So they decide they're going to print paper money. And all of these things together, this Congress is acting like a government. Whether or not they really thought they should be, whether or not they felt that they were entitled to, they knew that if this was going to happen, they needed to be ready for it. And in order to be ready for it, we have to start somewhere. We don't want to be caught with our metaphorical pants down and get attacked without any kind of preparation. So most of our colonists, they are what is considered loyalists. Okay, sorry, I had that backwards. My bad. Again, splitting headache. Hopefully sleep will cure it, because good night, this is killing me. Okay, back up. By 1775, There's a definite split that's happening between our colonists. You have the ones who are like, what are you crazy people doing? We need to stay British. I don't know what you're thinking. You're not drinking tea. Maybe you're smoking it because this is not cool. I don't know what you're thinking. It's not right. We're loyalists. We need to stay loyal to England. Most of these people are more well-to-do because they have a lot more financial ties with England. The other ones are the Patriots, not the football team. Tom Brady, no. Um, I don't even have a sarcastic rejoiner for that. Like, I don't know what to say. My own brain is blank. About a third of the colonists were considered loyalists, and about two-thirds were considered patriots. Our loyalists come from everywhere, all sections of the population. Um, but like I said, they skew wealthier and they're really spread out amongst all of the colonies. So it's not like you have this one enclave where there's a super big group of loyalists. The British thought that existed. They thought that there was a loyalist population that was stronger in the South. But and not really. Like, they're just kind of spread out everywhere. And really, you had loyalists who were from all walks of life. Your less educated are probably going to want to stay with England because they don't understand or even think that things should be different. So they would choose that as well. But during 74 and 75, and that's 1774 and 1775, the Patriots take control of most all of the local governments. The British Crown, like the governors that are appointed by the British Crown, they're obviously going to be loyalists. And strangely, a lot of our enslaved Africans are siding with the British. They kind of feel like, hey, if we stick with them, maybe they will maybe they will free us. Maybe this can be, this is our moment. Maybe that's what this is. And our Native Americans kind of side with the British because the British, they're the only ones that are protecting native lands at this point. They issue the proclamation line and they're like, hey, don't go past it. And all the colonists are like, okay, yeah, that's funny. Just kidding. We're going to totally do what we want to do. We're not listening to you. But at this point, the British are the only ones saying, look, natives, land, they need to have it. Leave them there. Don't go over there. And the Patriots are all saying, okay, that's cute. No. I'm babbling now. During the Revolution, you have thousands of American loyalists that are fighting for the British side. Now, in case you didn't know, Britain loses this war. And so after the war, many of these loyalists, they move either back to England. A lot of them actually go north into Canada and make their lives there. So here's a fun little graphic. Isn't it fun? It's great. Okay. What did I want to say about this? I can't even decide. When did an attack take place on Fort Ticonderoga? This is weird. I don't know why I organized it like this. Let me see. Did I skip something? No. No. He's cute. That's weird. Okay, there should be a whole section here talking about petitioning the king. So delegates at the Second Continental Congress, they're still hoping for peace because peace is always better than war. They actually send a petition, a resolution to the king, to King George III. And it's called the Olive Branch Petition. This petition lays out the situation. They say, hey, we know that we have been having, some conflicts here, but overall, we are loyal to you. We want this fighting to stop. We want the beef that we have between us. We want that to be solved peacefully, and please let us do that. George doesn't even look at it. He doesn't look at it. He doesn't answer it. He says that the colonies are in rebellion, and Parliament votes to send 20,000 soldiers to the colonies to quash this revolt. After sending this olive branch petition, the Continental Congress they issue a statement that is called the Declaration of the Causes and Necessities of Taking Up Arms. They were not really big on short titles at the time, but this document was written partially by Jefferson, and it says that the colonists are ready to die free men rather than to live as slaves. Now, that's rich coming from Jefferson, who was a slave owner. But, I guess hyperbole was the in thing to do at the time. So that's some interesting statements there. Anyway, so the day that the Second Continental Congress is meeting, May 10th, 1775, this is when the Battle of Fort Ticonderoga happens. And yes, it is a brand of pencil. Ticonderoga pencils. They're actually made there. Isn't that fun? I think. I don't know. I say that and act like I know. I have no clue. I just assume. So these random colonists all get together and they decide, hey, we're going to take that fort. The fort is at the southern end of Lake Champlain, and that is kind of if you have your textbook handy, there's a map on page 159 at the top, and you can see Lake Champlain is up there kind of between Vermont and New Hampshire, and at this point, not Vermont and New Hampshire, Vermont and New York, and it's almost going into Canada. So the fort is right there, and it's, to protect this waterway. But Ethan Allen, who now is a furniture brand, but at the time he was just a blacksmith, and he gets a bunch of his hick followers. They were called the Green Mountain Boys, and if that is not the name of a group of tractor-pulling rednecks, I do not know what it is. But they all get together, and they're like, hey, let's go take that fort from the British. The reason why they decided they were going to do that is because they knew that it was very, it didn't have a lot of officers there. I can't think of what the word is that I'm thinking of. It's really early. They cross Lake Champlain in the middle of the night, and there's only 42 British troops stationed there. Allen had 83 men, so, almost double. And the British are like, oh, goodness, we have been taken by surprise. I suppose we should surrender. And they did. It was a very important fort because it controls this route between Canada and the Hudson River Valley. So it kind of is the doorway between people, or not people, but like soldiers, coming from Quebec down into New York State and even further to the Hudson River. It has a lot of weapons, and it's got cannons. And see, this is something that the Americans do not have. They don't have weapons. They have guns, but when you have the British that are, they've got cannons, they've got all this kind of junk. You need that. So the Americans are like, hey, we're going to take this fort. We're going to take all these cannons. And they move those cannons down to Boston, and Washington sets up kind of a perimeter with these cannons they stole from Fort Ticonderoga, and this is what helps him make the British leave Boston. And again, at the top of 159 in your textbook, there is a very dramatic picture that shows oxen pulling these cannon through the snow, and a map showing you how they got the cannons south. Mostly they sent them down the Hudson, but it was not easy to go across Massachusetts in the winter, I am sure. I don't want to discredit them. He's my boyfriend. He's not my boyfriend. I would never marry him unless he had enough cannons for me. Okay. Battle of Bunker Hill. By June of 1775. So this is roughly a month after we have taken Fort Ticonderoga. The British have 6,500 troops in Boston. The Americans have about 10,000 troops surrounding the city. It's a very tense situation. The British troops, most of them were just ordinary people who, this was their job. Their job was to, be a soldier. And they really didn't care one way or the other. They were following orders. As you get higher up in the chain of command, sure, at that point it starts becoming, oh, what benefit can I get from this? But most of the people were just kind of doing what they did. About 1,600 American troops occupy a place called Breed's Hill. And they could see the city of Boston from this position. They're also able to fire on British ships in Boston Harbor. There's also something called Bunker Hill that is nearby. And I don't know if I'm going to have to look forward in this. Sorry. Okay, no. There's a really cool to me because I'm a huge nerd, a really cool reenactment and explanation of the Battle of Bunker Hill and the Battle of Breed's Hill, and I will post that as soon as I find it. I showed it last year, and I was like, of course I'm going to remember what this is, and I don't remember it, so I'm going to have to look on YouTube for it, but it's really good. It's a fairly detailed recreation. All right, so our Americans that are surrounding Boston are not trained soldiers. They are militiamen. They are ordinary people who had a firearm and knew how to use it, and they were like, we need you. So everyone is kind of like, these people are going to fold like a house of cards when they find themselves faced with British troops. The British thought that too. William Howe, he is a general, so General William Howe, he decides we're going to go up Breed's Hill and we're going to attack them. The American commander here is a guy named Israel Putnam, and he knows that his soldiers do not have the ammunition they need. He is the one, don't fire. I think this is it. I don't want to say this now because now I'm doubting myself that I hesitated. I believe he's the one that said, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes, because the weapons at the time were horribly inaccurate. And he was like, save your ammunition. We don't have a lot of it. So make sure you don't fire until you can hit them. The Americans wait until the British are about 150 feet away. And when they open fire, they kill a whole bunch of British soldiers. It was awesome. I guess I wasn't there. I assume it was good. So our first British attack coming from General Howe, fails. Then they send in a second attack. It too fails. And at this point, the British are like, what is going on here? We have gone to army school, and we are super cool and British, and we are supposed to be winning. Why aren't we winning? Well, number one, you're running up a hill. That's the stupidest thing you can do when you are fighting a war. If someone is above you, you don't try to chase them up the hill. Like, they're just going to mow you down. I don't know. I should have been there. I could have been awesome. Anyway, the second attack fails. Eventually, we have a third wave of British soldiers sent in, and the only reason why they did any better than the first two is because by that time the Americans had run out of ammunition because they were shooting all of their bullets into the British as they tried to run up the hill. So the British technically win this battle, but they lose 1,000 men who are either they're casualties in wartime. A casualty doesn't necessarily mean a death. It means someone who is wounded as well. So they have 1,000 casualties, and the Americans have about 400 casualties. But this is a big point because it shows that the Americans will fight, they can fight, and hey, maybe they might succeed. Don't count them out yet. This battle is called the Battle of Bunker Hill, even though it's technically Breed's Hill, but geography is hard. Um, this does not solve the issue that Britain is having. We still have Boston surrounded by American troops. I mean, this whole hill thing was great and fantastic and whatnot, but it doesn't help the situation with the British. The British want all of these Americans gone, so maybe they can march out and then, quash the rebellion and we're all happy again. But Washington and Putnam and all these people are like set up around the outside and they're like, we're not leaving. Because remember, I showed you on the other map when we were talking about Lexington and Concord, the only way you could get out of Boston by land was this little bitty slip of land. And if you can't get there, you're stuck. Washington finally gets there in July and, takes over from Putnam. And he knows that he has got to build like an actual army, not just a bunch of blacksmiths and, I don't know, people who make shoes, cobblers, whatever. He doesn't need just these random artisans. He's got to have real soldiers. And he needs weapons. He wants cannons. And this is where our cannons that we stole from Fort Ticonderoga, and we drag on sleds across mountains and through forests and all this stuff. It was a 300-mile journey. It took 3 months, but we got them cannons outside of Boston. It wasn't until March that the cannons actually got there, but it was under siege the whole time. So Washington puts these cannons on high ground overlooking Boston, and the British are like, oh, well, that is just not very considerate. No, we can't win our war. This isn't fair. Having cannons overlooking this city, that is the only city that you're really holding right now, shows them that they're not going to be able to defend this. So on March 17th of 1776, they all get on boats from the British Navy and they leave Boston. And that's it. They never are able to recapture the city of Boston. Even though, America has been able to kick out the British from Boston, this war is nowhere close to being over. Britain still has the most powerful navy in the world. They can use it to transport troops and supplies and, more seriously, blockade American ports. If they blockade our ports, it means that other ships cannot get in and people can't get out, and this is bad for people who live on imports. The British also get a group of mercenaries. We'll talk about them really in the next chapter, but they're a group called Hessians, and I'll explain why in the weirdest way ever the Hessians decide to join the British. So this is our fun little fight. Isn't it nice and dramatic? Love it. Love it. Okay. While Washington is training his army outside of Boston, we have 2 other armies that are moving north into Canada because we were like, hey, look, we're rebelling. Wouldn't it be nice if you joined us? Richard Montgomery leaves Fort Ticonderoga. And there's another guy, Benedict Arnold. He comes into play later. He is moving north through Maine. I would not have been doing that because it was winter, and that is stupid, but whatever. Arnold's troops decide they have to boil their candles, they have to boil bark, and they have to boil shoe leather to eat, or they starve to death. In late December in 75, Americans attack Quebec during a snowstorm. Not smart. This attack is, rebuffed. Montgomery is killed, so bye-bye Montgomery. Don't have to know his name anymore. Arnold is wounded. He lives, but still, like, come on. You don't attack a city in Canada in the winter, especially when it was only a stroke of luck that you were able to capture this town during the French and Indian War. Americans they set a siege on the city of Quebec until May of 76. And that's when new British forces make it into Canada. And the Americans are like, fine, stay British, Canada. You don't want to join our cool party. Whatever. I'm sure those were the exact words that they used too. I know it. I know those were the exact words. Okay, so that is the end of the chapter, end of section. In chapter 6, we really start going into our battles, exactly what's happening. I've been telling kids in class this. Making a timeline is really going to be beneficial for you when studying about wars, when studying about really anything historically, but wars especially. And our textbook does not go in chronological order. Like it'll say, okay, all of this stuff happened outside of this city, and then, in this other city, while all this stuff was going on, this stuff was happening. So it can be confusing. I recommend making this timeline. You can either make it on your on your iPad. There is an app called Timeline 3D. I'm not sure if it's on your iPads, but I think if you go to, I cannot remember what it's called, but you're supposed to be able to download it and install it. And I mean, it's a pretty cool tool. Like it gives you you hit a button and it's like, ooh, timeline. So I know that was very descriptive, and you're welcome. But I personally like just doing it on paper the old-fashioned way, because then like you're learning it as you're having to write it out. You just kind of remember it a little bit better. That's all I have for chapter 5. And hopefully I was a little bit more lucid for this. I mean, I'm making them back to back, so it's like 3 more minutes from when I ended the last one. Hopefully this made sense. If it didn't, feel free to email me, and I'll do what I can. So I put this map here so that you can see, okay, let me see. Here, we're at Boston. Bunker Hill, it's purple because we're not really sure who won. It was a moral victory for the Patriots, even though the British technically won. So that's where we are, here. Arnold leaves Massachusetts and marches all the way up here, which was super stupid. No way I would have done that. I'd have been like, it's cold. No, thank you. And then they end up having to retreat. We have our blue coming down. These are our Patriots, I think. Hold on. No. That's stupid. Why did they make... Okay, this is a ridiculous map, because blue is Patriots, red is Redcoats. That's how you color code things, people. Anyway, the red is on this stupid map is the Patriots, and the blue is on this stupid map, the British. So I think this is a great map, and I'll add more maps in the next section when we really start getting into the nitty gritty. So again, email me if you need anything, and that's all I got for you. So, yay. Oh, answer them. I'm going to post it, but just in case you need them or something, I'll probably forget. So here they are. Very good. Okay. End of list.